Welcome. Joe Volpe, publisher of Corriere Canadese, North America's only Italian language daily, here on behalf of Go Live TV and Corriere Media Group, covering the Toronto elections, and I have none other than the mayor of Toronto, Mr. John Tory. I should say his worship, John Tory, because of course you still have that title until October 22nd, and I guess you want to keep that title.
I do.
All right, so now you're a guy you've been around for a while. You've done a great job, in my view, in many of the posts, if not all the posts that you've held, including mayor. Why do you want to do this again?
Because we have unfinished work to get done, Joe. We have a transit plan that's in place and been approved and funded by the other governments. We now have to make sure we get the transit built.
How much money is that?
Well, we've got $9 billion from the other two governments, which is a historic number. We didn't have one penny of that when I became the mayor, and thanks to good partnerships, we have that $9 billion. We've got housing.
A little bit of working with other people.
Well, it does, and that's a key thing that I think people have to ask themselves is, who can keep those partnerships going to make sure that we get the money for Toronto to move us forward on housing and on transit.
And so what else do you want to do besides that transit? Hey, look, that always gets me going, but this is for you and not for me. But if you're up in this area of the city, traffic is at a standstill. You think you're on the Don Valley parking lot 24/7.
But the best way in which we're going to be able to deal with the traffic is to build transit, because unless people have some alternative to get around, to get to work, to go shopping, they're going to use their cars. And so that is why we're building an unprecedented amount of transit now. But if we delay ourselves, if we sort of go off, the plan that we're on, which actually has us doing like 6 projects at a time, not just one, which was the old way, then that traffic is going to stay bad for a long time. And so we have to get the transit built so people have an alternative to get around the city other than using their cars.
But how about making the stuff that's there a little bit more efficient?
Well, we're doing that. I mean, we, for example, moved to 24-hour construction a lot of the time so as to get projects done faster that mess up the roads. We've moved to some of the most advanced technology in the world that even changes lights depending on how the traffic is, traffic signals. Mm-hmm. We've had enforcement blitzes because there are still people who insist on parking their cars to go and get an espresso or something at the coffee shop and then leave their car sitting in the middle of the traffic.
Because they're more important than anybody
else. Well,
but
that's what they think. So that's why we've been towing cars away and doing things like that. So we have to carry on with all of that. But in the end, the thing that is going to best help traffic to get better in the city of Toronto is to build transit and to build it as quickly as we can and as much as we can.
So that might be one of the things that make this place really livable, more livable than it's been in the past. But this is a really vastly diverse city. And one of the things that's really a problem is the cost of housing. Now, there have been all kinds of ideas floated, but Toronto, on one hand, it's got this claim to great fame. 97 cranes up there building condos.
Most in North America.
And it's been that way for at least 5 years.
Yep. So the number one thing that I'm doing, because we're talking about livability and affordability, is keeping taxes low. Because I know there's a lot of people watching out there who the biggest check they write every year, especially for seniors and some young people, is to the City of Toronto for their taxes. And I think the best thing I can do to make sure the city stays a city people can live in is to make sure the city stays affordable. And it also means addressing the traffic and building the transit so people can get around the city in an affordable way that is better than the bad traffic that we often experience. It also means addressing the affordable housing issue, which is something that I'm pledged to do, which is to make sure we dramatically increase our efforts to build affordable rental housing in particular in the next term of office by using city land, for example. Taking city land and saying, we'll put that in. If a developer then says, in return for us putting it in for, say, $1 a year, they will build affordable rental housing because we're drastically short of affordable rental housing.
But there's a huge piece of property just to the north of us, say, half a kilometer away. The old Downsview land, De Havilland, and Bombardier lands. They used to all belong to the government of Canada at one point. But that's going to be a huge potential project.
Yes, now that piece of land is employment land, which the city has also been very strictly guarding because of the fact you need to have places where people can work. So there is every 5 years a review of how all land is used in the city, and I'm sure that in the course of that review, which starts next year, there'll be some reconsideration of some pieces of land in the city. But I'll just tell you that we need to put city land up for affordable housing, but we also need to make sure that we preserve land in different places where presently it is called employment land for jobs, because we're not going to be very happy if we have a city that consists entirely of places where people live and there's nowhere for them to work inside the city.
Portlands, for example, which are over on the other side of the city, What are you doing with those?
Well, they're going to be developed into mixed use of all kinds. So there's going to be great new open spaces by the waterfront. There's going to be jobs there, and we're going to make sure there are jobs there, and there's going to be lots of people living there. So you'll find that there'll be other uses like educational institutions and so on. So I think that's going to be an exciting part of the city, but we're going to be very conscious to keep it mixed use, jobs, residences, parks, and open space, and so on, but also mixed income, so that everybody has a chance to live there, because we don't want to become a city either where you either have to be very comfortable or really struggling in order to be able to live here. It needs to be a place where all people can live.
So let me speak for a moment, or ask a question on behalf of all those people who are outside of the downtown area. You're talking about creating a livable place, an exciting place. In Toronto is all of those things. But we have a tendency, those of us who live in the burbs, so to speak, northwest Toronto, northeast Toronto, that people down at City Council have somehow forgotten that we exist.
I have tried really hard to make sure that has not been the case, that not only have I not forgotten, but I've made an effort to be in every part of the city. And I think people who know me will know that going back, even before I was mayor, I spent a lot of time out across the city, helping as a volunteer to work for a lot of different agencies that work with people. But as mayor, I spent as much time in Etobicoke and Scarborough as I have downtown. Now, my office is downtown, but I've still spent a lot of time. I even took, for example, the city's executive committee to actually have a meeting outside of City Hall in Scarborough. But beyond that, if you look at my transit plan, for example, my transit plan has transit going to every single part of the city. And that's because I know it's important to connect up the different parts of the city, because we really can't be one city where everybody shares in the prosperity, everybody can get around, everybody has access to these jobs that are coming to our city, unless you have the transit to connect them up. And I've also stopped. I mean, there were people before who pitted one part of the city against the other and said, oh, well, Etobicoke's getting more than Scarborough, or North York is doing better than downtown. And I stopped with that, because it is one city. And to me, if any part of the city is doing well, that's good for the entire city. And I've tried very hard, and I will continue not to be the mayor of any particular part of the city, but to be the mayor of all of the city and provide the kind of leadership that the whole city needs.
Well, that's reassuring, because we've gone through a difficult time this year on the crime and law issues, and the issues of guns. Now, you were asked this question by hard copy Corriere Canadese, but what is the solution to the gun problem that appears to be surfacing and the violent crime that appears to be taking place?
It's a three-part solution, and you can't separate one from the other. One, support the police, and that's why I supported without any hesitation the hiring of 200 police officers this year and 200 police officers next year, many of them to be neighborhood police officers that are in the neighborhoods for 4 years at a time instead of for 4 weeks at a time or 4 hours at a time. Two is to change the laws, and I happen to believe that in answer to the question, why does anybody need a handgun in the city of Toronto, I don't think anybody does, and so I think we should ban them. And then the third set of initiatives that we're undertaking in cooperation largely with the Government of Canada is to support kids and families, to invest in kids and families, especially in some of those more isolated neighborhoods where the difference with an after-school homework club or a sports program or a music program will help keep kids on the right side of the path, and give them a sense of inclusion and hope going forward. And so those are the three things we're doing: support the police, change the laws, get the laws changed, and invest in kids and families to give those kids a positive alternative to stay away from the gang activity that is often put in front of them.
So a lot of the kids that are going into school today that are into our community are new kids, immigrant kids. I remember when I was one of those myself. But you have, or the city has, got into some exchanges that are rather sharp with respect to immigration policy, and refugees and refugee policies that see a great influx into the city that's been unpredictable and unpredicted.
Well, we've had a worldwide pattern of migration, of people moving in very large numbers because of turmoil in different countries in the world. And Canada has a proud history of accepting refugees who come from other countries fleeing persecution. If you look back at, whether it's the Vietnamese, the Tamils, and so on, it's been a proud history. And I think that's a proud history that should be continued. But the problem has been in recent times that it has taken far too long for there to be a hearing, which everybody's entitled to determine if people are genuine refugees or not. But make no mistake, our tradition should continue as being people open and compassionate to refugees, and immigration has built this country. You know, going back to the early days of when the biggest waves of immigrants were coming from Italy and Portugal and places like that, and now some of that immigration pattern has changed, but they're still building the country. They're still making big contributions. They're still settling in well here because we are a country that embraces people
And the
from
city
other
of
parts of the
Toronto
world.
is a sanctuary city.
We are, and that simply means that we're not going to say to somebody who shows up at the door of a shelter and says, I need a place to sleep overnight in the middle of February, well, show us your passport or show us your immigration papers. And I think that most people would accept that approach, but I think what we really want to do is make sure that when people come and claim refugee status here, that they get a quick hearing so we know they're either entitled to stay or they're not. Knowing that we mustn't let our country turn into a place where we become polarized about immigration and refugees, because those two things have been big positive factors in building this country. If you look at the people who are here today, say from Vietnam back in the 1970s, they're in huge positions of responsibility. They're owning their own businesses. Their kids are becoming doctors and accountants and police officers and teachers. And this is the tradition we have to continue in our country, because it's something the world looks at and says, wow, those people in Canada understand how to do this. And so we have work to do on that. But to me, to turn our backs on a proud history that has worked would be a mistake for us.
Okay, well, John Tory, mayor and candidate for his own job. This is Joe Volpe on behalf of Corriere Canadese thanking you for watching, and you can follow us online at corriere.ca, corriere.com all day long. And I want to thank John Tory for coming to the studio with us. This is a conversation we could go on forever, but we got signals that we got to stop because you have to go to other places. Thank you very much.
Thank you
all
very
the
much,
best
Joe.
to you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. We'll catch you on the next time. Joe Volpe for Corriere Canadese and Go Live TV. Wishing you a good day.